Here we go. Good to see you. Um, I've got my regular camera here just to begin with because uh, I wanted to see the lineage lamas
Oh.
and to see whether we could find where Dharmakirti and Dignaga are. We've been quoting Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika many times, so I thought it would be worthwhile to do that. But we may be able to do that a little bit more later. I'm going to go back to my other camera here. There we go. So good to see it, everyone. This is our usual class, and we're going to begin with some prayers that host is going to put up in a second. There we go. So let's try to set a motivation. Sangye chodang soki chognam la Changchu Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chushe Gipe Sognam Ki Drola Penchu Sange Drupa Shog. I said Dagi Chushe, so that was what I was saying. So due to the merits, due to the collections of of explaining the Dharma, but you should say Trinyan. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit sentient beings, in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki rola penche sangye drupa sho. Sashipoki Chukshin Meto Tramri Rab Lingji Nidegen Badi Sangye Shindu Mikte Uwagi Onam Shinla Chupasho. Then, while holding the mandala, we make a request. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, that's good. So I want to see the rest of you. I'll put in gallery view here. Okay. So we're going to begin with a little meditation as usual. Sit yourself comfortably. Some people have to have their legs extended. If you have to sit in a chair, that's completely acceptable. I think Venerable Renee, maybe Don, have you seen Venerable Renee teaching recently? Is he seated in a chair usually these days?
I think he's still sitting cross-legged. I'm going to see
Okay,
him next weekend. We'll see.
okay, okay. So sit comfortably and you, you know what to do. Watching your breathing with mindfulness, and then after some time, you yourself switch over to watching the mind. And once you've recognized the mind, try to focus on its clear light nature as your object of mindfulness. as part of the discipline of letting go of the discursive thoughts while watching the breathing, which is something you should be doing. Also, recognize if there's tension in the body as you're breathing in and out, to let go of that. And change over to the mental consciousness when you've reached some quietness of mind. If you can use the fact that the very presence of thoughts in the mind indicates the mind has this conventional clear light nature. It doesn't obstruct the entry or exit of thoughts. You can use that as an aid, letting go of those thoughts so that they absorb back into the consciousness and you're left in a non-conceptualizing state without any other images or thoughts or plans. Memories of the past, plans for the future. It's about the present. when we're agitated by the news, the TV or newspaper, when we're agitated by just everyday life experiences, this is a great refuge, different than just having no thoughts whatsoever. You're actually meditating on the clear light nature of the mind. And hopefully, eventually, that will be accompanied by a pleasant feeling, either mental happiness or physical contentment. We can change ourselves. We can become an exemplary human that others admire and use that status to be able then to influence them toward virtue. Because of this clear light nature of the mind, we can reformat the solid state drive, so to speak, the hard drive of your mind. I think Bob Thurman used to call it the reformatting the hard drive. Replace the deep set priorities of pleasing others and pleasing mom and dad or whatever, pleasing society, working for our own happiness alone and so forth. Replace that with thoughts that are dharmic, the individual of beginning scope, working for the happiness of future lives, understanding impermanence and karma, that we will die, and that where we will be reborn and the experiences we have depend upon what we do now. The person of intermediate scope, knowing that wherever we're reborn again in the future, that will also have an end, and that it's better to escape from cyclic existence completely, not trying to just keep up making new karma every lifetime for the next lifetime. Or taking the advice of the Buddha to follow his Mahayana teachings, great vehicle teachings, that take us to the great destination of Bodhi, of enlightenment, within the great vehicle that has room for everyone, like the Italian family car. There's always room for one more in the car, always room for one more at the table. And investigating what Buddha meant by advising us to develop this special mind of bodhicitta, recognizing that we can start to spend more of our time concerned about the suffering of others, putting ourselves in their place, first with the Lanrim teachings of empathizing, recognizing the suffering of the lower realms, the human realm, the Mahayana teachings of equalizing and exchanging self and others, remembering the kindness of sentient beings, developing warm heart through that, and also through just realizing that we're exactly equal with them. All living beings, we're exactly equal in wanting to be happy and wanting to be free of suffering. So identifying with the entirety of sentient beings as our aggregates. We are self when we have crazy moments. We have maybe some kind of recognition of that, and we try to overcome that. So to think of the entirety of sentient beings, some of whom are having crazy moments right now, let's say humans, to be patient and compassionate, aiming to be able to help them overcome that. The idea of bodhicitta is to create the causes of achieving enlightenment, because the bodhicitta has these two factors: aspiration to achieve enlightenment, the desire to achieve enlightenment, and also the desire to alleviate the suffering of sentient beings. For that purpose, as we understand more and more the benefit of that, this auspicious moment seems more and more auspicious, so to speak, now more and more important, because we can actually use this life right now when we're free from the lower realms, we're free from other obstructions to practicing the Dharma. We can use this to develop the causes of bodhicitta and the causes of enlightenment, because it's only the enlightened state, it's only from the enlightened state that we can lead sentient beings perfectly. We can do it without effort, we can do it spontaneously, without effort, and without error. To do that, we need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, which are explained in Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, particularly the collection of wisdom there, Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Vatara, which supplements that with extensive explanation of the collection of merit, explained by Lama Tsongkhapa in the Gompa Rapsul that we're studying, the illumination of the intention. So think, that's why I'm going to be participating today, to accumulate the two collections in order to achieve the Rupakaya and the Dharmakaya, the two bodies, form body and wisdom body, to benefit sentient beings. That's the reason I'm listening and contemplating and meditating on what is being presented. I'm going to participate in order to become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. That's our long-term goal. As I've mentioned many times, the Dalai Lama has given the example of going from Dharamsala in India, where they, the Cloud Gunj say, where the teachings are given, down to Delhi, New Delhi, by bus, usually, maybe 4 hours, maybe 5 hours, 6 hours, depends what kind of bus you get. Along the way, you may stop for a meal, a snack in the middle of the night, or for tea. It may not turn out well, but it doesn't matter. Your goal is to get to Delhi. In our case, our goal is to get to enlightenment. Whatever happens along the way, day by day, even life by life, doesn't matter if we keep deep in our hearts that goal. I have to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of sentient beings. Okay, bring your attention back to the present. Good to see you all. John is giving us love this morning, this afternoon. Hi, Richard. Hi, Subash. Hi, Paul. Hi, Jennifer. The rest were here before. So, yeah. I thought that I would give, as I do sometimes, quote from Geshe Zopa's motivations. during the summer courses, he'd always give a long motivation in the morning, and then we continue class, and in the afternoon go straight into the teachings. But I think I might have mentioned this verse before, but I'm going to read a little bit more of Geshe-la's commentary on this right now. This was from July 11th, 2002 in the morning. In fact, I do remember because I was asking about this Madrope Shue Do Anavapta Raja Nagaraja Paripricha. So the sutra requested by the king of the Nagas. How do you say it, John or Paul?
Anavatapta, I believe.
Anavatapta. So here it's translated: whatever is produced from conditions is not produced. So that means it's not inherently produced. Sounds contradictory, right? Whatever is produced from conditions is not produced. Whatever is produced from conditions is not produced inherently, truly. It does not have an inherent nature of production. This is the wrong glasses on. That which depends upon conditions is considered empty. One who knows emptiness is diligent. Geshe-la said also sometimes in the text, the word for diligent is, here it says bagyo-yin, so that Geshe-la translated as diligent. Sometimes it says Khapa-yin, means is wise. Whoever knows emptiness is wise or is diligent. And he said, Geshe-la said, this means whatever things are produced from conditions, they are not born. That means, that refers to being inherently born, inherently produced. Because remember, we're talking about refuting inherent production. Whatever produced things have no inherent birth, no inherent production. Therefore, whatever depends on conditions, they are explained as empty, empty of inherent production. Anybody who understands this is, conscientious, bhakti, or sometimes it's translated as Khapa-yin, they are wise. Or you could say Khapa-yin also, they are masterful, they are skillful in understanding. Therefore, in this sutra, it also clearly says on one side, Rangshin Gitongba. Maybe some of you remember some of these words you've heard enough. Rangshin is the Tibetan word that's often the translation of svabhava, nature. Generally, that nature refers to what we believe to exist in phenomena, some kind of findable inherent nature. Rangshingi Tongba. Tongba means empty. And the particle between them, empty and nature, is empty by nature. Rangshin Gitu Tongba. It's not empty of inherent nature. When I've asked lamas about that, they say that generally when you talk about something being empty, if it's capable of being empty, you could say this is empty of water. But if it's something that never has had that thing that you're talking about, the emptiness, you say empty. We still translate in English empty of inherent existence, but in grammar you would say empty by inherent existence. And anything which arises from causes, from conditions, is not inherently existent. That's what Rangshingi Tongba, Rangshingi Mepa means in this Prasangika system, empty of inherent existence. So this is among the main sources, this quotation and others. So nothing inherently exists. Nothing inherently is produced, meaning when he's talking about sources, there are various scriptural citations that we can refer to that can help to strengthen the mind, that this is actually the words of the Buddha. So then he also quoted Lama Tsongkhapa's praise of dependent origination. He started with verse 26. Intrinsic nature, this is using Thupten Jinpa's translation, if you have, you can find on the internet. Intrinsic nature, uncreated and non-contingent. Dependent origination, contingent and created. How can these two converge upon a single basis without contradiction? So the Tibetan says, Rangshin, Chumin, Tume Dang. So Geshe translated, his translation was, that means here, I will say at this time, Rangshin means Rangshin Gi Drupa. It means inherent existence, inherent nature. If something is inherently existent, that should be Chumin. Chumin means non-fabricated, not made by causes and conditions. That cannot be Chumin. If something is inherently existent, it can't be created by causes and conditions. As we've been talking about, if something is inherently existent, that means it's going to be independent of anything else. It's going to be independent of causes and conditions and so forth. It's also tome, which means not dependent on any part. So therefore, if anything inherently exists, then it should be like that. If it's impermanent, it should not depend on causes and conditions. If it, in a more general sense, it should be tome. It should be, how does he say, shouldn't depend on any parts. In the opposite way, anything that is a dependent arising, the second line says, Tendel Tudang Chomi Ni. So that means dependent arisings, Tendel, are dependent and on causes and conditions if they're impermanent, and they're dependent on their parts, those two. That's opposite of things that are inherently existent. When you accept things that are dependent arisings, are dependent natures, they should be topa, made out of causes and conditions. And tendel tudang, tupa means dependent on another part. That way, tendel must be produced dependent on causes, whereas inherent nature, rangshin, svabhava, is not made, is not produced, is not dependent. And then the last two lines, see how did Jinpa translate? How can these two converge upon a single basis without contradiction? So these two, how can it be without contradiction to come together on one basis? There's no way to say these two. So you can't have on one basis something which is inherently existent, yet is a dependent arising. Lower tenets would say it's okay, right? The Indiana tenets, they would say things are inherently existent. Let's say even the lower tenets say truly existent, sort of covering much more, yet they are dependent arising. But according to the teachings of the Buddha, you could not have those two categorizations on one phenomena. They couldn't be both inherently existent and dependent arisings. And then Geshe quoted the next verse, verse 27, therefore, whatever originates dependently, though primordially free of intrinsic existence, appears as if it does possess intrinsic existence. So you, Buddha, taught all this to be illusion-like. So when we're talking about svabhava, inherent nature, as opposed to dependent arising, tendel, pratitya samutpada, you, Buddha, taught that things, although they are dependent arisings and are primordially free of intrinsic existence, primordially free means from the very beginning. It wasn't that they were once inherently existent and somehow by your wisdom you changed them or they became non-inherently existent. Inherent existence has never existed. They are primordially free of intrinsic existence, yet they appear as though they do have inherent existence. So this is a common theme that we find so often, that this dichotomy, things appear to be inherently existent, yet they are actually empty of that. And it's our adherence, our belief, our following on the appearance of inherent existence that's our problem. And this is what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught all to be illusion-like. So not everything all conventional things are not illusions as some people would have it, but they are like illusions in that they appear, but they don't exist the way that they appear. Therefore, whatever rises dependently does not inherently exist. It only exists dependently. From the very start, from the very beginning, primordially, they do not inherently exist. They completely depend on causes and conditions. All these things are isolated, completely empty of inherent existence, free from the very beginning, yet they look like they exist from their own side, by their own nature. They appear to be inherently, naturally existing without being made or dependent on something, appearing in that way. That is the reality. Empty, yet in the opposite way, appearing in the opposite way, appearing to be inherently existent. So therefore, everything is like a magical illusion. So Geshe said, this topic is great. Try to understand how all phenomena, all things are empty of their own inherent nature, yet they appear, they look, they sound. Well, you can also say they smell, they taste, they feel as though they are truly existent, inherently existent. That is their nature. They look that way, but they are like illusions. That is to be understood. When you understand that one properly, then that is the real conscientiousness or mastery. And then Geshe said, so therefore, so many masters here in this class. I'm not sure whether we were anyone's master, but yeah. So I wanted to say just one other thing before we start. We were talking the other day about one of these verses of mind training, and it comes up in other places. It's not only in the mind training, that one should always cultivate happy mind, mental happiness. Do you remember that? We're talking in some context. So I wanted to quote this stanza from Lama Chopa Puja, the Guru Puja that we do often. If you happen to have the FPMT version, this is the verse 97. LC 97. I guess LC stands for Lama Chopa, right? So I've just changed the order of the lines a little bit here to coincide more with the Tibetan verses. In short, so this is in the verses in the glance meditation at the end of Lama Chopa on the Lan Rim, and in that verse it talks about, the perfect cultivating the proper reliance on the Guru and perfect human rebirth and karma, impermanence and karma and renunciation and the causes of bodhicitta. Then it gets to the mind training verses. And here it says, in short, no matter what appearances arise, be they good or bad. So that means in our lifetime, whatever's happening, outside, sometimes catastrophes, social chaos, in your own life, sometimes good things happening, bad things happening, whatever happens, be there good or bad, whatever appearances arise, through the practice of the 5 powers, which are the essence of the entire Dharma teachings. Who knows the 5 powers? Jennifer, do you know the 5 powers?
No, I've forgotten.
Oh, okay. Don, do you know the 5 powers?
I think intention, familiarity, abandoning non-virtue, adopting virtue, and I don't remember the 5th.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Prayer, maybe. So, the what does it say? He's calling powers here. Sometimes they call it 5 forces. So that means that the force of intention. So these can be applied during the life. The 5 forces can be applied during the life, but particularly at the time of death. Also, the force of intention was sort of like when we make a motivation at the beginning, sort of very strong impetus that sort of colors everything that comes afterwards. The force of the white seed, as Don said, creating virtuous karma. The force of sunjin. How do you translate, John or Paul or anyone else know? How do you translate sunjin?
Abandonment or something.
Yeah, remorse, something
Could
like
be kind of like remorse, sort of like uprooting from the sort of sense of things that you've done, feeling totally uncomfortable with, wanting to get rid of them. So
repulsion or something.
Repulsion, something like that. So force of intention, force of the white seeds, force of sunjin, repulsion, so forth. Force of familiarity. So doing things again and again so that they become ingrained in your mind and in your life. And then the force of prayer. So those are called the 5 forces or the 5 powers. Through the practice of the 5 powers, the essence of the entire Dharma, may I transform them, whatever appears, be it good or bad, may I be able to transform these appearances into paths that increase the 2 bodhicittas. Richard, do you know what the 2 bodhicittas are? It's simple.
Aspiration, and I forget the term for the other one.
Engaging?
Ultimate, engaged, yeah, sorry.
Could be, yeah. Here, I think it means the 2 bodhicittas, conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. So whatever you do, to use it for grist for your Dharma mill to increase your conventional bodhicitta. So in some cases, it's going to be something where whatever appears, say if it's something is uncomfortable in your own experience, recognizing this has come about from your own karma and from the collective karma of others, and to feel compassion for them and develop bodhicitta. That's just one very small example. On the other hand, there's sometimes when the situation will be amenable to meditating on emptiness, that this appears this way, and it is activating my afflictions, my delusions, because of my grasping on it to exist as really bad or really good, really good ice cream, really good pizza or whatever, really good opportunity, and meditate on emptiness. So that's kind of the sense here. I remember when I was first ordained at Khapa, and I would go to the market a couple of times a week to buy vegetables for the Sangha. I'm not sure what that post is called. Sometimes I'd get coolies to carry back the vegetables up the hill in the rainy season when the road was washed out. Sometimes we'd get a taxi. But always in the evening, I would look back over the day, not just during those trips, but whatever was happening, thinking about what had happened and to be able to transform them, whether they were good experiences or bad experiences, into enhancing the two bodhicittas, enhancing my conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. And then the last line, thus grant me blessings to cultivate only mental happiness. That's the connection with what we were saying before. We said that in the previous class. We were talking about that sort of dharma. What would you say? Dharma. It's not hint. Dharma suggestion. To transform, to cultivate only happiness. So even things are going bad, you say, oh man, this gives me the chance to meditate on conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta, which most people in the world have never even heard of or thought of, or even if they've heard of them, if they were explained to them, they would think that's totally baloney. That's totally useless. Why would you do that? We have the opportunity to be able to cultivate that. So I just wanted to share that with you as we talked before. Okay. So how are we doing? Anyone have any questions from the past about the class or general Dharma questions before we begin? Everyone good? Okay. What does it say? The meeting is being recorded. Oh, I see. Okay. Anna, you have a question, I think.
Yeah. Venerable, I was looking at, thank you. I was looking at my notes, and I was wondering, I don't know if this is a big ask or a big question, but would you mind, unless you wanted to wait till Monday's review, what are the two cessations again? I think we kind of talked about it on Monday.
Okay, well, there are various, if you said what are the two cessations, that's different than saying what are the two cessational absorptions. So we were talking about the two the two absorptions, and one of which was called cessational absorption, and one was called absorption without discrimination. The absorption without discrimination takes place at the top of the form realm. Once you reach the fourth dhyana or jhana, then you can develop that. But above that, in the formless realm, there's something called cessational absorption. That might be what you're thinking of, but in other contexts, when we talk about the two cessations, in the Abhidharma Kosha, there's a famous verse that says, the form and the two cessations are, space and the two cessations are permanent. In other words, when elaborating in the Abhidharma, what are impermanent things, what are permanent things? There's so many impermanent things that we experience. Abhidharmakosha pointed out that space, that means uncompounded space, the lack of obstructing contact, and the two cessations are permanent. And those two cessations are what? Richard, do you know the two cessations? Rocio, have you heard of the two cessations? Oh, Nadine will know. Maybe not.
I think liberation and enlightenment.
Mikhail, what do you think? Two cessations?
No, I don't recall. Sorry.
Oh, Sumvansh.
I think nirvana is one.
What is it?
Nirvana.
Nirvana, okay. And what's the other?
And I'm going to guess on the other is enlightenment.
You're going with earlier answer. Okay. Stephen says he has an idea.
Analytical and non-analytical cessations.
Right. That's what's mentioned in the Abhidharmakosha. So what does that mean? Analytical cessations are what we have, which are not actual cessations. Things are not ceased from the root, so they'll never come back. But while you're applying an antidote, for instance, to anger, you'll have a temporary cessation of the arisal of anger. If you're meditating on compassion and love and so forth, those kinds of cessations, while they last, they're permanent, but they're not actually ceased from the root so that they'll never come back again. Those are called non-analytical cessations. They don't depend on an analysis that is analyzing the ultimate nature of phenomena. Analytical cessations are what we often think of in the, when we talk about cessation, which can include nirvana and the state of enlightenment, all of the cessations that occur, the true cessations. Those true cessations cease from the very root, and once they're ceased, they will never come back again if they're analytical cessations. Does that help? Who was it? Who was asking that? Was Anna? You were asking that? Yeah. Does that help?
Thank you.
So I'm not sure which of those two contexts we were talking about. I think we were talking about the two absorptions, one of which was called cessational absorption. So maybe that's why you said two cessations. Okay.
Actually, Venerable, I appreciate you answering it because actually I had both of those questions and you managed to answer both. I was the one who was unclear, so thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay, excellent. So we are in our text. I said last time we would start about here in Jimpa's text, page 134, and in the FPMT translation, 111. And I have to admit, I only recently realized that in the electronic version, that doesn't have actual page numbers because you can change the font size and everything, right? That in brackets in there, it gives the page number from Jimpa's text. Is that right? That's the page number from his text?
In the printed version that we have in brackets, the page number of the Tibetan that his organization laid out, that I can't remember, you shared it, the Illumination.
Right.
And
Okay.
I don't think it corresponds to the printed text.
Okay. In the electronic version, though, am I correct in saying that we are on page, in Jimpa's text, we're on page 134, or is that a mistake? Is that is the correct? Okay, so that in the electronic version, those brackets are bracketing the written text that you can buy, the big thick book that I have downstairs. Okay. So we were at a point where it said, this too is an expression of someone who has not understood the meaning of the text and has failed to comprehend how logical reasoning works. So that's where we're going to start. but to understand what are we talking about, we have to go back to just the paragraphs before that. So the general outline that we
I'm
are.
sorry, Venerable George?
Yes. Yeah.
Venerable George. I think John was right. The square brackets refer to the Tibetan pagination, not to the English pagination. So where it says square bracket 134, that's 134 in the Tibetan.
Okay, so what is it in the written text? Then
It is 209. It is 209.
Okay, so okay, thank you for correcting me. So that Tibetan, that page 134 is if you have that the text that Jimpa's organization put out, which you can download free of charge. Did we put it up on? Did we make it available on the chat? I can't remember. I don't know if anyone here reads Tibetan, but it's those pages. So this is actually, again, John, Paul, what page?
The Tibetan or the English?
209.
It's 209 of the published English.
Right, okay.
And so it would be 134 of the published Tibetan.
So my neat thought that it had the page numbers of the written book completely wrong. It's of the Tibetan written book. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So let's go back. This is talking about just the paragraphs above that. The outline that we're at is a decisive analysis of these points, and that has two outlines. The FPNT translation says critical analysis of those. Jimpa says these points. In the FPNT, it says these absurd consequences. So, when we're talking about the two absurd consequences that Chandrakirti brought up about production from other, what are those two absurd consequences? You remember?
One of them is proliferation of causation, that everything could be produced from everything.
Yeah. Sounds right. And what's the other? Jennifer, is that your mode of
Oh,
trying
no, because I remember there was a question in my mind from the last class, but what I took away 2 classes ago was that any cause could create a specific effect, and any a specific cause could create any effect.
Okay. Is that right? Nadine, what are the two?
The second was cause and non-cause would become equal.
Okay. And the first one?
Everything could arise from everything.
So even thick darkness could arise from the flames of the fire and so forth and so on. Okay, so those are what are being talked about here. Jimpa doesn't say, it says a decisive analysis of these points. It means of these two absurd consequences. This has 2 parts. Why extreme consequences, absurd consequences, ensue for arising from other. So in brackets, page 134, if you have the Tibetan text. And 2, excuse me, demonstrating that it is not a contradiction to accept the reverse of these consequences, or the opposite of these consequences. And you remember what that's referring to. Remember, when you have consequences, a consequence is a statement that says, that has the word, it follows that, or there is a consequence that, as opposed to just a syllogism. Like, say, a syllogism says sound is impermanent because it's a product. Or if you stated it as a consequence, how would it be phrased as a consequence, Subhansh?
Venerable George, I'm sorry, I don't know how to do that. I don't know what
You should say if it would follow that sound is impermanent because it's a product, or some kind of system like that. It would have to have the words telwa in Tibetan or prasanga in Sanskrit. So when you when you propound consequences to the lower tenets, when the Prasangika propounds certain consequences, their intention is that it will throw a syllogism. You would take the reverse of the sign, put it as the predicate of the syllogism. You would take the reverse of the predicate of the consequence and put it as the sign of a syllogism. That's what's being talked about there. So, so Jimba's text continued, here some Tibetans assert that absurd consequences ensue for subscribing to the thesis of arising from other. We agree with that. We say that there are these extreme or absurd consequences that follow on if you believe in arising from other, meaning arising from inherently existent other. And they say some Tibetans say that because cause and effect are, in temporal terms, necessarily sequential, while otherness, for two things to be other, when you talk about production from other, requires simultaneity. And Jimba says, without beating around the bush, says, this is totally incorrect. Or as FPMT once says, however, this is extremely unsuitable. I think this is totally incorrect. This is more exactly right. For in that case, all the faults one has leveled against the opponent to refute arising from other will equally apply to one's own position. What does that mean? Let me see, anyone who's, okay, so Paul's eyes are looking up, so he has an answer. Everyone else is looking down. You don't want to be called on. Paul, what does that mean?
I'm sorry, we'll just say that one more time.
So Jimba's text says, for in that case, if you were to assume that these absurd consequences come because of the fact that they are not, cause and effect are not simultaneous. They're taking the position that for two things to be other, they have to exist at the same time. We talked about last time, like on the tabletop, two things existing, sitting there on the tabletop together, they could be said to be other. And they said that these absurd consequences come about because of the fact that the cause and effect are not simultaneous.
Right.
That part we agree, but that's not why these absurd consequences come. For in that case, all the faults that one has leveled against the opponent to refute arising from other will equally apply to one's own position. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, the short answer is that it means that the faults that they think are there are actually their own faults. So the fact that if they are like that, then it could not produce something.
Well, yeah. Another way of saying it is that even if they were, even if they're not other, they're still being produced. You still have a cause producing an effect. Whatever, if they're inherently existent, the same faults are going to accrue whether you say that they're simultaneous or they're sequential. It doesn't matter. It's just like, useless. So
Shinto as he just says, Shinto Mirik.
Yeah, Shinto Mirik. Very, very wrong. Very, very incorrect or whatever. Yeah, just down law. Now, if one responds to this by saying, we have no position, that is, if a Madhyamaka or the people who are trying to explain incorrectly why there are these absurd consequences, they call themselves Madhyamakas, and they sometimes hold on to Madhyamaka positions like standpoints, meaning, like very often it says in the we'll find some quotations coming up. in the Prasangika or in fundamental wisdom, if I held this, Nagarjuna would say, Prasangikas do not have any position. He didn't use the word Prasangika because that term didn't come up till later, but essentially what he's meaning, we who hold this particular view of reality, which is the Prasangika school, we have no positions. All we do is some people think that all the Prasangika does is refute other people's positions. That's not the case. So now if one responds to this by saying, we have no position, then one's effort to seek the reason to refute arising from other in the first place becomes pointless. Because to refute arising from others, to refute other production is a position. You know, if you say we have no position, then what was your effort in trying to refute that? Because that refutation is a position. Then it goes, now, many Tibetans assert, we had just gone a little bit over this last time. Now, many Tibetans assert, the earlier statement said, here's some Tibetans assert. Now, many Tibetans assert the following. And his note 394 is referring to a text by Losang Tamdin. Who is Losang Tamdin? Is he one of the text writers of Losaling or Ganden or someone? Anyway, some Tibetan Lama. Annotations. He says that this refers to many Tibetans who were confused by Jayananda's critique of autonomous syllogisms. Okay, so we're talking about this. We were talking in the last class about the misinterpretations of Jayananda, and Mikhail had pointed out that also. So many Tibetans assert the following. When logicians establish an entailment, or what does FPMT say? When logicians establish the pervasion, yeah, this the word here, Khapa. When logicians establish a pervasion, for example, between fire and smoke, what does that mean? Fire and smoke are causally related, right? Smoke is the cause of fire? Don? Is smoke the cause of fire?
No, fire is the cause of smoke.
Yeah, right. They're causally related. And there's a pervasion. What is the pervasion or the entailment, as Jimpin likes to say here? Don, what do you think?
Fire is pervaded by, the smoke is pervaded by fire.
What does that mean?
There's fires, there's always smoke. They're connected.
When there's fire, there's always smoke. No, that's the wrong way. When there's smoke, there's always fire. It's always that way. So that's why those particular kinds of syllogisms that depend on causal relations are called effect reasons, correct effect signs, because you're depending on the sign of the effect to infer or to prove the cause. Okay, so many Tibetans assert the following. When logicians establish the pervasion or the entailment, for example, between fire and smoke on the basis of a specific instance of smoke, so they're trying to establish the pervasion that when there's smoke, there's fire on the basis of one example, like in the smoky kitchen or something like that. And when it's just a specific instance of a smoke, the smoke in a kitchen, or between being impermanent and being a product. This is talking about the other kinds of relationship. There are two kinds of relationships, right? Richard, do you know the two kinds of relationships? No. There are causal relations. If I said that was one kind of relationship, what's the other kind of relationship? Jennifer, do you know?
The nature?
Natural relationships, right? They have the same, two things are related in that they have the same nature, such as what? Permanent and being a product. So, for instance, you could say sound is impermanent because it's a product. So it being impermanent and being a product have a natural relationship rather than a causal relationship. So when logicians try to establish the pervasion between fire and smoke, or between being impermanent and being a product, they do so by establishing invariability across all places and all times. That means even though you're talking about one particular example, like in a smoky kitchen, fire exists because smoke exists. You'd have to have an example other than the smoky kitchen. Usually smoky kitchen is the example that you use. You might observe smoke in the kitchen, but when you try to establish that relationship, you don't establish it, you don't want to establish it only on one place and one kind of condition. You want to establish it in general. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire. Not just when there is a smoky kitchen, there's fire. Tracking? Suvansh, you follow it? Okay, that's not so bad, right? So this is done first on the basis of a specific instance, such as in relation to a kitchen. In the case of fire and smoke, yeah, we would say, you know, in your own experience, you come and you go into the kitchen. Whenever the kitchen is smoky, there's a fire going on in the stove or in the hearth or whatever, on the middle of the floor, depending on how crude your kitchen is, right? Okay. This is done on the basis of a specific instance, such as in relation to a kitchen or a vase, which between the two members of the entailment. And I say a vase in the case of being impermanent and being a product. So you would say a vase is impermanent because it's a product. How could you actually observe that? We talked about this last time. If you're making a vase or pot, the potter, you would understand that the pot isn't permanent because it comes about from causes and conditions. Also, you know, if it falls on the floor, it will break, so it's impermanent, right? But that doesn't prove that everything, you know, that you could replace other things in the place for a vase yet. Or a vase in the case of being impermanent and being a product. And their aim then is to establish invariability between the two members of the pervasion or the entailment by drawing similarity across other times and places. So this is what some Tibetans assert. So what Chandrakirti is doing here, these Tibetans assert, is to throw an absurd consequence against them, using the argument that insofar as being other is concerned, all things are equal. This is really crazy. They say that this type of argument topples the opponent's position with a kind of domino effect. So we talked about this before, this Dokpa Chikpe Pungbu, or what was the word Jose used in his text that Joan also used? Induction. In Venerable Joan's translation, she says, in this case, Chandrakirti flings absurd consequences by means of the reason of the similarity with respect to being mere other. This kind of reasoning is called induction. And in her note 18, yeah, she says, Dokpa Chingpe Pungbo. Okay, so what is this talking about? This is saying some people, some Tibetans are saying that when you have a syllogism like these, the sound isn't permanent because it's a product, or what do I say, in a smoky kitchen or in a smoky pass, fire exists because smoke exists. For example, like a smoky kitchen, the example is something you've actually ascertained with your own eyes or your own nose or tongue or ear, or you have some direct perception of that, and then you try to extend that. When there is smoke, there is fire. Some people think that you just do it by a preponderance of examples, like what was it, Paul, you were talking about in answer to one of my questions? You were saying the scientific method is what? You remember what you said?
Oh, we were saying it was inductive, I think,
You said by means of experimental observation.
Experimental observation, right? Yeah. You then extrapolate a theory, basically.
Right. You then use induction.
Right.
So actually, although in general logic is not scientific, in this case, in the case of establishing relationships, causal relationships or natural relationships, you do make an observation. It's kind of like an experiment. You see in the smoky kitchen, or in a particular place, you have smoke, and that there's fire there. Beforehand, when there was no fire, there was no smoke. Or let's say when there was no smoke, there was no fire. And then later again, when things clear away, you see that unless there's fire, there's no smoke. So you can actually create a hypothesis, sort of scientific, a thesis, that where there is smoke, there is necessarily fire, and that this will carry over to other situations. Now, oops, where we go? In the chat, okay, illuminating the intention. Doris, could you put in the chat the
Smoky Pass one?
no, the excerpt from, I have to put on the right glasses to be able to read. I have these nice glasses from Diana and Brock, but I had on the reading glasses have to read the reading glasses. Excerpt from Satkari Mukherjee. So Mukherjee was this Indian pundit. I'm not sure if he's still alive. I think that was a long time ago. Either of you know John or Paul? Mukherjee, this is.
I think that's the Mukherjee from the 1970s. I suspect it's probably.
Oh, okay, not that long ago. It might still be long. So, verse 34. Did you put that up? Excerpt there. Okay. So if you take a look at that PDF, I don't know if you can do that. Is that something you can do right now on your computer? Okay. So let me read what this says. This is talking about again Pramanavartika, the text by Dharmakirti, who's up in the refuge field. We'll talk about that before we end the class. Verse 34 is very important. In fact, it was the beginning of the basis of some excerpts by John Donne for his PhD thesis. He translated and annotated various verses from the Pramanavartika, from the whole book, but this is from the first chapter. But so this is a very important verse. So in Mukherjee's translation, it says, if again observation of co-presence, what would that mean between the let's say fire and smoke, and the non-observation, that is the observation of the absence of both, when there's not when there's not smoke, there's not fire. If again those observations or non-observations be not the requisite conditions of the concomitance in agreement and the concomitance in difference, how can we be sure that smoke will not fail to accompany fire? Okay, you have to sort of think about that for a while. So the verse says, since smoke is the effect of fire. The Tibetan is very clear that way. It says, me debu duate. And the Sanskrit, not so clear. Maybe this is a job for John and Paul, who were Sanskritists. It doesn't, in that verse in the Sanskrit, you don't see the word fire. You have the word karyam. I mean, you don't see the word result. You have karyam, which doesn't usually mean result. But anyway, it says, smoke is the effect of fire, or result of fire. As the characteristic of the effect are observed to be present in all. So what this is saying, now what was not observed before, what would that be? If before you had fire, you didn't observe smoke, right? What was not observed before is observed when certain facts have been observed, and is deduced, or maybe induced, that the subsequent entity is the effect of the antecedent entity. This triple test is found to be satisfied by smoke. Okay, what is this talking about? My friend Jeremy Mannheim said that when they debate this subject is called the Sema Duksum. I can't remember what this duk is. It means set, 3 sets of pramanas, 3 sets of valid cognitions. So what's it saying? In Mukherjee's text, it says, the relation of cause and effect is ascertained by the application of a triple test. If one is to demonstrate by experiment, that's why I was saying it's almost scientific, that smoke is the effect of fire, one has to show that, first of all, there is neither smoke nor fire previously present in a place. So that's sort of like setting your baseline, right? You go to a place where there's no smoke and no fire, first of all. And then at that place, fire is produced and smoke is observed to follow. Is that true? If you create fire, there would be smoke? Well, in some cases, okay. Then the third thing is, at that same place that originally had no fire, no smoke, and then you created a fire and there was smoke, then fire is removed from that place and so is no longer observed. Therefore, smoke is not observed. This is kind of like the triple, what's called here what did he say? The triple test, okay? Kind of like scientific experiment. So through actually observing that, you're able, Dharmakirti argues, Dignaga argued, that you're able to make a general pervasion that when there is smoke, there is fire, not just in that particular place, but in general. And there are many, many arguments in the Pramanavartika of, when we say other people say, but how can you be sure, and so forth and so on. It goes on many, many, many pages, many, many stanzas. But this is generally the general proof that we're talking about here. not that you use a preponderance of examples. You have to, you say, I checked on the smoky pass and there was fire. I checked in the smoky kitchen and there was fire. I checked in the northern forest that was smoky and there was fire. By a preponderance of individual examples, you can, some people would say that you can create the induction that where there's smoke, there's fire, but there would still be kind of hazy. Here it's what Dharmakirti is saying is you don't do that at all. Simply observing it one time with this kind of triple test, that will carry over to all cases. The last two lines of that stanza of verse 34 say, if an effect were to come into existence, even when the cause were absent, it would forfeit the character of being conditioned by the cause. Does that make sense? If an effect were to come into existence, even when the cause were absent, if you were to have smoke, even when there was no fire, it would forfeit, or it would, what is the Tibetan here? Depa. It would go beyond the character of being conditioned by the cause. Okay, complicated. Anna, what do you think?
Venerable, we're a little bit past the halfway mark of class. Do you wish to take a break?
Let's just finish up a couple of questions first, and let you, while we take a break, we'll ruminate. John, what do you think?
I don't have a question, but this is there's a language thing. I think that word huta means like a burnt offering, a sacrificial oblation. In Vedic sacrifice, so they're saying huta bhuja means arisen from the huta, from the fire, as in Vedic fire.
John, I think that's buj, not boo. Boo would be to arise from. I think buj is eat. So it's the one who
it's the huta bhuj.
It's the one who eats the oblation. In other words, the fire.
The fire that eats the oblation. Agni, yes, right.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's really interesting. I had sent out some feelers to people. I should have come to you guys for trying to figure out how that's Sanskrit. I couldn't find the word fire in there anywhere. Thank you for that. Okay. Uta bhuja, eating the, what do you say? Eating the offering, something like that.
You're the one who eats the offering, or something.
Which is the fire, which is the may, right? Okay. So if an effect were to come into existence, even when the cause were absent, it would forfeit the character of being conditioned by the cause. So those are the two parts of that stanza. It said, smoke is the effect of fire, as the characteristic of the effect, that means smoke, is observed to be present in it. And if an effect were to come into existence, even when the cause were absent, it would forfeit the character of being conditioned by causes. Okay, so that was, I just wanted to bring that up in this context right here. So let's just see before we take a break. This too is an expression of someone who has not understood the meaning of the text and has failed to comprehend how logical reasoning works. Now, when invariability is established between fire and smoke, that's the example that we had here, right? Or between being a product and being impermanent, in general terms, without specifying a particular smoke or the product in a specific time and place, one can certainly remove the doubt that perhaps there are instances, again, Doris and I will be scratching heads. It's getting near double negatives, right? One can certainly remove the doubt that perhaps there are instances where, although fire and being impermanent are negated, the two examples cited as reasoning proofs, smoke and being a product, are not negated. So what is that saying? It's just saying that one can still have, one can remove the doubts. That's what I said in Pramanavartika. It goes on to people having many doubts. Well, maybe in those cases when there was fire, there was smoke, or when there was smoke, there was fire. But maybe sometimes, maybe in certain circumstances, there can be smoke and no fire. Different kinds of doubts like this. Those, one can certainly remove those doubts. That's what it's saying here. Where is it? In contrast, there are many instances where the two things can be negated as being cause and effect, but they may still exist as mere others. So how can these cases be similar? In fact, the very expression toppling with a domino effect, that's what Jimpa's translated as Dokpa Chikpe Pungbo, or what we could say induction. The very fact, the expression induction reveals that theirs, shouldn't that have an apostrophe before the S on theirs? Maybe not. Theirs is an argument betraying ignorance of the way of reasoning. That this is so, I have discussed extensively elsewhere. So that's where we're going to take a break. And if Doris, would you put up the 3-columned document? What is it called? You know what I'm talking about, Doris?
At the Smoky Mountain Pass?
Yeah. What's the document called, Doris?
Sorry, Venerable. Are you referring to the Smoky Pass one?
Yes, right. With the 3 columns, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So put that up. Let's take a little break if you want to download that. And I'm going to stretch my legs for a second and lay down. I'll keep my microphone on if anyone wants to ask questions, or if you want to debate amongst yourselves while we take a short break. Okay, we'll be right back. Oh, okay. We got to get back here. Okay, take your time if you've gone to tea or gone off to the restroom. I think what's being talked about here is visible fire, so not in incomplete combustion, and what is coming out from that incomplete combustion may not qualify as being actual smoke. So it's something to investigate, okay, at any rate. So what I wanted to just introduce to you, because Jimpa's note at this point, if you see in your text, that this is so, I have discussed extensively elsewhere. What is so? In fact, the very expression Dokpa Chikpe Pungbo, induction or toppling with a domino effect, reveals that theirs is an argument betraying ignorance of the way of reasoning. So what is this way of reasoning? That from what we just talked about in verse 34 from Pramanavartika, that you can prove in general a causal relationship between fire and smoke through this 3-part test. And Jimpa's verse, note 396, where it says, I have discussed extensively elsewhere, so I'm not going to go into more detail now. That verse, that note says, see, for example, The Essence of True Eloquence, folio 90B6. So that refers to the Tibetan. And the English translation by Robert Thurman, Central Philosophy, page 325. So this printout, or PDF, if you have, has this particular section that Jinpa's referring to. In the upper right-hand corner, upper left-hand corner, it actually says 82A5 in the Tibetan. And so it's just a little bit before where Jinpa's citing. He said what, 80? Oh no, maybe that's a different pagination. He has folio 90B6, but in Thurman's Central Philosophy, page 325. So on this text, there's Tibetan in one column. There's a translation of that Tibetan by Jeffrey Hopkins in an unpublished manuscript, which we were given permission to just cite this section, because that his whole translation of the Prasangika section of the Essence of Eloquence has not been published. And in the third column is Thurman's translation of that. Okay, so let me read a little bit of what Jeffrey translated this section. This is essentially the section that we're talking about. About this topic of autonomy, one Pandita, that's referring to Jayananda. So you remember who Jayananda is, right? Mikhail, do you remember who Jayananda is?
Yeah, he's the Indian master who wrote a commentary of the Umala Jukpa of
Right.
Chandrakirti. And
he didn't write commentary to Gompa Ramsel. It was way before Lama Tsongkhapa. He wrote to Madhyamaka Vatara. So Lama Tsongkhapa sometimes agrees with him, sometimes disagrees. So here, this is from not our text, not from Gompa Ramsel. This is from Lama Tsongkhapa's other text, Essence of Eloquence, Lekshe Ningpo. About this topic of autonomy, one Pandita, Jayananda, says, and then Jeffrey has in brackets, in paraphrase. So he's not quoting Jayananda exactly, making it a little more simple. If there were valid establishment of signs proving probanda and pervasions, autonomous signs would be feasible. However, since these do not exist, autonomy is not feasible. This is Jayananda's idea. So he's arguing against autonomy means what in this context, Paul?
Well, I assume he's talking about autonomous syllogisms. Or maybe, yeah.
Yeah, Rangyu.
Rangyu, yeah.
Svatantra. So Svatantra means, can refer to the syllogisms where each of the elements is inherently existent, or it can refer to the school of Madhyamaka, the Svatantrikas, who accept that syllogisms are that's a valid way of proving things with autonomous syllogisms. In other words, that they accept inherent existence. Concerning that, it is not feasible to assert something that is validly established for both parties of a debate as a sign, that is, a reasoning, because the former party does not know that it is validly established by the later party or the latter party. This is because of not knowing the other party's mental features, through clairvoyance or something, through direct perception, meaning clairvoyance or inference. The former party also does not know what is does not know that it is validly established for oneself, because though it was decided that way, it is possible to be deceived. This is Jayananda's ideas. So then I think that's the quotation from Jayananda. That's Jayananda's idea. Then Lama Tsongkhapa says, this is extremely unsuitable. The same thing that comes up, John, Shinto Mirukte, right? If you see in the left column. John, did you download that PDF? Can you see that?
Yes, I have it. Yeah.
So that this is extremely unsuitable. This is completely wrong. For if it were so, it would not be feasible to make refutations even by way of what others assert, because oneself would not know that the other party asserted such, since one did not know the other's mind. Furthermore, it would not be suitable, it'd be wrong, for oneself to make refutations showing damage to another's position, because although one decided that something was damaging, it is possible to be deceived. Okay, so that's just sort of prelude to this section on the next part of that page. Okay, continuing reading Jeffrey Hopkins' translation in the middle. With respect to Jayananda's reason why the pervasion is not validly established, he says, in paraphrase, direct perception realizes that the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in a kitchen. See if you can grok that for a second. Is that right? This is Lama Tsongkhapa's, this is Jayananda's statement. Direct perception realizes that the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in a kitchen. And then he has in brackets, that is to say that the existence of fire occurs with every instance of smoke in a kitchen. So you can verify that with direct perception. Every time there's fire in the kitchen, there's smoke in the kitchen, okay?
The reverse, no? Wherever there is smoke, there is fire.
Right. But here he's saying, direct perception realizes the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in the kitchen. But as Mikhail was pointing out, that means wherever there is smoke in the kitchen, there is always fire in the kitchen that preceded it or is simultaneous with it at that point. Direct perception does not realize that the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in all places and in all times. So this is a wrong idea. This is what the Jayananda's saying, what other people, when Lama Tsongkhapa was saying here, that many Tibetans have this idea based on their reading of Jayananda, okay? Because as we just read from the Pramanavartika, there's a threefold test. Maybe you could say scientific experiment. You experiment and you can determine a general relationship between smoke and fire that extends beyond the particular circumstances that you're investigating it. Right? Making sense? Okay, no, not many people nodding. KT, are we making sense? How are you doing there, girl?
I came on a little late, but it's mostly making sense. Just the last thing you said. I'm starting to, maybe my brain gets a little tired though, I don't know.
Mine too. So some people are thinking you have to prove, you can't make a general statement that where there's smoke, there's fire. All you can do is make particular statements about particular situations. In the smoky pass, there is fire because there's smoke. In the smoky kitchen, there's fire because there's smoke. And then because of a huge number of examples like this, you can cause an inductive reasoning to say that in general, where there's smoke, there's fire. But just observing it one time, you can't prove it. Dharmakirti is saying the opposite. He's saying that doing it one time in the proper way, you can prove it in general, in all places, in all times, in all situations. Diana, what do you think?
You are muted.
Yeah, she's. I can't see her lips moving, so maybe she's not speaking anyway. She's trying to figure out how to unmute, maybe. There you go.
The word realize there, what does that word mean? It seems to be something analogous to legitimately prove.
Okay, so the Tibetan says mitokbe. You won't know this in the if you read the what is it, the Tibetan text. What do you call this? Not phonetics. What is it called?
The transliteration.
Transliteration on the left column. About the fourth line down, it says mitokba. Mitokbe. Tokpa is that spelling, R with an R prefix and an S suffix, means to realize. That means to have eliminated superimpositions and have actually not just understood it in general. Generally, when you've realized something, that means you've realized it with valid cognition. Okay. If you haven't used valid cognition, it doesn't usually constitute a realization. You have an understanding of something, vaguely. It may be mixed with correct belief or wrong ideas or doubt or something like that. But a tokpa or realization means that you've eliminated all superimpositions. You've gotten to the actual essence of something. Okay. So, where is it? So Lama Tsongkhapa said, direct perception realizes that the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in a kitchen. That is, that the existence of fire occurs with every instance of smoke in the kitchen. It does not realize that the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in all places. This is Jayananda's idea. And Lama, and also he says, also inference does not realize that the predicate of the probandum. Oh, now we're using words we may have mentioned a couple of times. Does anyone remember what predicate of the probandum? This is using other terms that we've used before, but it's talking about the same thing. What is the predicate of the probandum? Richard, do you know? Is that those terms that you know from logic?
I was just looking up probandum, and it's a fact that needs to be proven. It is something that is being disputed and needs to be established as true or false. So the predicate of the probandum is the predicate of what needs to be proven
right.
true or false.
So probandum is what we also call thesis, right?
Okay.
It's let's say, sound is impermanent. Is that the probandum? Is that right?
I think so, yeah. That's the
Stephen,
thesis.
you agree? Sound is impermanent. That's the probandum in the syllogism. Sound is impermanent because it's a product, like a pot. Sound is impermanent is the probandum.
No,
Stephen?
it's not. I think it is.
Yeah, you're saying yes. I was asking Stephen.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yes.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the predicate of the probandum would be what, Richard?
Is impermanent?
Right. Okay. So that's the second element. So you've got the probandum, which is the first two elements. The predicate of the probandum is the second. The first element is called the subject. Okay. The subject and the predicate form the probandum. Mikhail?
Yeah, sorry, I'm back to the what these Tibetan assert and the induction effect.
Right.
And so they do not accept that the pervasion is correct in all places and times.
By observing it once, they say, you can't prove that it will be true in all places and all times.
Okay, so they are saying that Chandrakirti is proving things by collecting like a bunch, an army of examples to prove the thing.
I believe that's the kind of the meaning of the Dokpa Chikpe Pungpul. Pung means like,
wow,
can actually mean army, but it can mean like a big mass of things. Pul means pushing, so that means using that preponderance of evidence to say, oh yeah, it must be that where there's smoke, there's fire. But Dharmakirti is saying that in general, you don't have to do that. That's not.
I see. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so we finished. We were still reading the second part of Jayananda's thing here. Also, an inference does not realize that the predicate of the probandum, and then in brackets here, it explains what that means. That is the predicate of what is being proved, the existence of fire. It doesn't realize that that pervades the sign of the existence of smoke in all places and all times. This is Jayananda's idea. Therefore, pervasion is established only through the world's assertion of it and is not established by valid cognition. Okay, Jayananda is saying. So here is it. Shinto mi rikte again. This is very unsuitable, Jeffrey translates, or as Robert translates in the third column, this argument is entirely wrong. I like Robert's more direct. Yeah, this is entirely wrong. Unsuitable doesn't sound strong enough. Jeffrey says, this is very unsuitable because Jayananda is making a refutation upon misapprehending the meaning of the establishment of pervasion described in texts of logic, in the texts on valid cognition. What does it say? Oh, Rikbezung, yeah, in the text on logic. Okay, so what is this talking about? He is making a refutation upon misapprehending the meaning of establishment of pervasion. So when we have a logical argument, we have a subject, a predicate, and a sign or reason. That is, the subject and predicate form the probandum, the thesis, that which is to be proved. Sound is impermanent, for instance, because it's a sign. When you have that, there are three things that have to be true. Sul sum, for a correct syllogism. Sumvasha, do you remember that? That terminology, the three modes, what has to be present for it to be a correct reason?
Venerable Judge, I think that I looked it up last time, but I don't remember.
Okay, I'll help. So there has to be the property of the subject. That means the subject, the first element, has to be with the reason. That is.
Oh, yeah, yes. That
sound is impermanent because it's product. Sound has to be, you have to have perceived that sound is a product. You're trying to prove that sound is impermanent, but you have to know that sound is a product, which could be done because you can hit the gong and you know that sound comes because it's produced from causes and conditions. So, and then there has to be two pervasions, a forward pervasion and a reverse pervasion.
Right. The forward pervasion is where the effect has to pervade the reason.
The effect has to pervade the reason?
Yeah, I mean,
We have three elements. We have a subject, predicate, and sign.
Oh, that's right. Predicate has to pervade the reason.
Okay, so that means in this case, sound is impermanent because it's a product. That would mean what?
So impermanence has to pervade product.
Being a product, which means if it is a product, it is necessarily impermanent.
Correct.
Okay, and then there's a reverse of that, which we'll just make more complication. The reverse can be used in certain circumstances, but we won't worry about that right now. So he's talking about here, this is very unsuitable because Jayananda, is making a refutation upon misapprehending the meaning of the establishment of pervasion described in the texts of logic. Because it is not at all the meaning of the texts that the establishment of the pervasion of the existence of smoke by the existence of fire, right? Because we're talking about, what are we talking about? A smoky kitchen? In the concept of the kitchen, yeah. So in a kitchen, smoky kitchen, smoke exists fire exists because smoke exists. So you're talking, the pervasion is between the existence of smoke and the existence of fire, right? Where there is smoke, there is fire. For it is not at all the meaning of the text that the establishment of the pervasion of the existence of smoke by the existence of fire in the context of a kitchen is that one is proving that the existence of kitchen fire pervades the existence of kitchen smoke. That is, that fire in the kitchen occurs with every instance of smoke in the kitchen. It's not the meaning of the text that's what one's proving. Otherwise, Lama Tsong Khapa's text continues through Hopkins' translation. Otherwise, it would absurdly come to be that one proves the existence of kitchen fire on a past possessing smoke through the sign of the existence of kitchen smoke. Okay, what is this talking about? So, famous syllogism. Where's okay, Karen's up there. David and Karen. So did you guys ever go trekking when you were in Nepal? Did you go trekking? No? Oh, okay. Who went trekking in Nepal? Paul's been trekking in Nepal, right? John's been trekking in Nepal. Sometimes you see smoke on a pass. That means when you're going along in between mountains, certain area that's clear, you may see something that, it might be clouds, might be smoke, but if it is, to ascertain that it's smoke, you would have to smell it. You would have to have other signs that it was smoke, that it was not just dust from the yaks running down the trail, getting up dust, or clouds, or some kind of mist or something like that. But this is a famous example on a smoky pass. So that means you actually have to have ascertained that there's smoke there. On a smoky pass, fire exists because smoke exists. Then you could say, example, like a smoky kitchen, because you know that you've seen in a smoky kitchen that where there's smoke, there was fire. Okay, so on a smoky pass, fire exists because smoke exists. That's the syllogism that's being talked about. Very classic effect sign. So otherwise, it would absurdly come to be that one proves the existence, instead of saying on a smoky pass fire exists, you'd have to say on a smoky pass kitchen fire exists. That's what he's saying here. Otherwise, it would absurdly come to be that one proves the existence of kitchen fire on a pass possessing smoke, smoky pass, through the sign of the existence of kitchen smoke. Because when the pervasion of the existence of fire is proven through the sign of the existence of smoke on a pass, one proves the pervasion of the example of that, which is held as the sign by that which is held as the predicate. And the mode of proving that also is as before. That is the absurd position given above. Okay. More information than we need or want, but I just wanted to share that with you. So in the future, those of you who can read Tibetan can go across. You can compare Robert Thurman's translation, which is in some cases a good point to Jeffrey's, but in some places it's completely wrong. Like in that last section there, Robert translates, otherwise the reason of the presence of smoke in an occasionally smoky kitchen would prove the existence of fire of that kitchen always. He's translating lala as occasional. In the Tibetan, it says, in the far left, it says, itar mayina, otherwise, if that wasn't the case, dua dang dempe la. That means dua dang dempe la means a smoky pass. The second la means on a smoky pass. Sangmangi du yope tak. The sign of the existence of a kitchen smoke. Anyway, so I won't belabor that anymore. Those of you who know a little Tibetan can have some fun going back and forth there. So the basic point here is that note 396, Jimpa says, Lama Tsongkhapa, what did he mean when he says, I have discussed extensively elsewhere? So this is one of the places, as Mikhail has mentioned in Lanrim Chemo. Which chapters were they, Mikhail? You quoted to me.
The wrong interpretations of the distinction between Prasangika and Svatantrika.
And also quoting misinterpretations of Jayananda in Lanrim Chemo. I think there were chapters 14, 16 in Lama in Geshe Zopa's. No, you were quoting the Snow Lion.
Yeah, that's in the Lanrim Chenmo. Yeah, but the name of the chapters are the same in Geshe Sopa. Yeah.
Right. So they overlap this a little, but those are other misinterpretations of Jayananda, not particularly this one that's talking about reasoning, that once you've proved a reason in one way with correct observation, because whenever you try to prove a relationship, whether it be a causal relation or a natural relation, whenever John's cat comes on his desk, whenever you prove that, you have to prove it through some direct perception so you have to use your senses, like say in a smoky kitchen, in a smoky kitchen, fire exists because smoke exists. Once you've proved that, you don't prove it only in that situation, it will carry over into other situations also. So this is relevant to what we were talking about emptiness before also. Once you proved the relationship that all phenomena, or say all dependent originations, are empty of inherent existence, let's say on the basis of a sprout, a sprout, which is the dependent arising, is empty of inherent existence. That relationship continues, that carries on to all examples of that also. Okay, so something to think about. Let me just, because this is supposedly where we're going to start today, and that's all we've covered. So let's just read a little bit more. In view of the above, how is this statement from clear words, the prasana pada, to be understood? That is, in view of the above, how is this statement of no position to be understood? So in this quotation from prasana pada, it says, we accept the establishment of conventional truth in terms of mere conditionedness, or as FPNT translation says, due to mere conditionality. So Jimpa says, we accept the establishment of conventional truth in terms of mere conditionedness, not on the basis of adhering to any of the four positions: self-production, production from others, from both, or from no cause. Remember the four alternatives, you might say, or the four positions. Otherwise, if we didn't, there is the consequence that things possess intrinsic nature, which is untenable, which is wrong. If one accepts this mere conditionedness or mere conditionality, cause and effect will then be mutually contingent, and thus will not exist by virtue of an essence. As a result, one will then not speak of things as being endowed with intrinsic nature. So what's that talking about? This is a quotation from Prasana Pada. So who wrote Prasana Pada? Does anyone know?
Chandrakirti.
Chandrakirti wrote Prasana Pada, right? It's a word commentary to fundamental wisdom. So he says, we accept the establishment of conventional truth. Conventional truths can be established on the basis of mere conditionality or mere conditionedness, that they have, let's say, that they have arisen due to causes and conditions, mere causes and conditions, not inherently existent causes and conditions, mere causes and conditions. What does mere mean? It means merely labeled causes and conditions. We accept the establishment of conventional truths in terms of mere conditionedness, conditionality, not on the basis of adhering to any of the four positions, or not asserting any of the four positions, which means, the production from self and other and so forth. Otherwise, well, let me read what Venerable John said. It is not due to asserting the four positions, because it would follow, in asserting the four positions, that things have inherent existence. And second reason, because it is unsuitable, or because it's wrong. Jimpa doesn't have an and there. He says, otherwise, there is the consequence that things possess intrinsic nature, which is untenable. Actually, there's two statements there. Otherwise, there's the consequence that things would possess inherent nature, would be inherently existent, and because it's completely wrong. The two things. Anyway, we'll talk about that the next time we talk about this. Then it says, if one accepts mere conditionedness, mere conditionality, that phenomena don't arise inherently, but they arise in terms of merely imputed, let's say, other. Let's say the sprout arises from a merely existent other seed. The seed and the sprout are merely other. They're just nominally other. They're imputed as other. You can't find the seed anywhere. You can't find the transition from the seed to the sprout anywhere. They are just imputed by the mind. If you accept that, cause and effect will be mutually contingent. What does that mean? Mutually dependent. Venerable Jones says, mutually dependent. The cause depends on the effect depends upon the cause. Why is that? The effect depends on the cause, right? Would you agree, Rosu? An effect depends on the cause. Does the cause depend on the effect?
What I think is that if there is like the cause can only be labeled as a cause if it produces an effect.
Good girl. Can I say? Yeah, right. So that's what it means, the mutually dependent or contingent, and thus they will not exist by virtue of an essence. They will not be established by means of their own entity. As a result, one will then not speak of things as being endowed with intrinsic nature, or whereby things do not appear as having inherent existence. Okay. So that's where we will start next time after the break. We have a break next week, and then we will begin a unit, I think, of what? 6 classes? And then we'll have a break, and then we'll have a set of 5 classes before we end for the summer. So this is something for you to think about over the 1 week break. What Lama Tsongkhapa said when he said, I've explained it extensively elsewhere. You can check the readout, that the PDF that we have. Also, you can check, as Mikhail suggested, in Lanrim Chemo, and see if you can kind of figure these things out. Sumash, what do you think?
Venerable George, 2 points. Firstly, what I notice is that if you look at the karikas, just the verses, okay, Chandrakirti's verses, right?
Right.
Within and compare it to the commentary that Lama Tsongkhapa has put forth. The explanation of the position of the Prasangika is not in Chandrakirti's Karika, it is in the commentary.
Okay, so you have to realize what Lama Tsongkhapa, we see the Karika there, so we say, oh, that's Chandrakirti, and then below that, it looks like Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary. Actually, that commentary, Lama Tsongkhapa, generally is paraphrasing the Basham, Chandrakirti's auto-commentary.
Right.
Chandrakirti was explaining his comments, his karikas. Lama Tsongkhapa sometimes rephrases it in more colloquial terms sometimes, or in terms that are not so scholastic, but it's for us very scholastic. Also, Lama Tsongkhapa is basing his commentary on Jayananda, where something appears that's not exactly from Chandrakirti's Basham, auto-commentary, explaining a karika. Lama Tsongkhapa sometimes is paraphrasing Jayananda's when he agrees with Jayananda. Jayananda's not always wrong. Jayananda was privy to sort of the oral tradition of the explanation of Madhyamaka in India, because he came from India, but probably the tradition that he had studied in India also had a misinterpretation about the difference between Svatantrika and Prasangika, so that Lama Tsongkhapa criticizes Jayananda in those situations where he doesn't agree with Jayananda, or he just doesn't even mention it in certain circumstances. But when it's egregious, when the misinterpretation of Jayananda is egregious, and other Tibetans, on the basis of Jayananda's commentaries, have held those wrong views, like here, Lama Tsongkhapa goes out of his way to criticize Jayananda. But so Lama Tsongkhapa's, if you read the Bhashyam, you say, oh, Lama Tsongkhapa's not saying anything different, maybe a little bit,
right.
adding some words in there. But sometimes he adds a lot, to clarify certain things.
Yeah.
So it's not as though we're only reading the Madhyamaka Bhashyam, the auto commentary by Chandrakirti. We're getting some flavor interpretation of it by Lama Tsongkhapa.
Okay, so that was point one. The second question I have for you is, the word intrinsic is used often over here, right? Intrinsic is in the text. It's here, right? The word is used, and I think you commented earlier, right, that intrinsic means independent, right? One interpretation of that is independent. Is that really where you leave it, or would you say intrinsic has anything else also, that any other meaning?
Yeah. So I'm not stuck on the word intrinsic. That's Jimpa's translation generally of Rangshingi Drupa, which in other contexts we would translate as inherent existence rather than intrinsic existence.
Okay.
What resonates with your mind? Do they sound the same, intrinsic and inherent?
Yeah, I mean, for me, they are close. I read some other Madhyamika texts, and I think I also see inherent. I see inherent, and I think intrinsic too. But you see why? Because I think the philosopher Jan Westerhoff, he writes extensively on this word. Okay, and so I was actually pleasantly surprised, and but there's a lot to say about that particular word. Okay, and its definition.
Wait. When you say that particular word, if you're talking about the English word,
no, he actually writes on swabhava.
Okay,
right?
okay.
Because
so that's usually
I actually feel that I feel that whenever they say intrinsic, they're talking about swabhava.
Probably, generally, that should be. There are other hypothetical synonyms of inherent existence or intrinsic existence. And you remember this discussion, why they're called hypothetical synonyms, right? Because if two things are synonyms, they have to both exist. And since svabhava does not exist, and all of these other hypothetical synonyms of it, existing by its own characteristics, existing from its own side. Paul and John, what are some other hypothetical synonyms?
Established by way of its own character.
Right. A whole list of them.
Okay.
So they all have a slightly different flavor. They give a different idea. So even the English words intrinsic and inherent, they're meant to, they're actually translating one Tibetan word, one Sanskrit word, like as you say, svabhava, but they kind of give a little different flavor of it.
So would you say that? So you said intrinsic would cover or would equate to independent, but would intrinsic also imply unitary or permanent? Or no, you don't think so? See, swabhava may, right? It depends. But I'm curious, where do you draw the line with intrinsic?
Well, let's not use the word intrinsic. Let's say svabhava, rangshin. Okay, what are its characteristics? Its characteristics are to be independent of anything else. So you could say that it covers independent. When you talk about the selflessness of a self-supporting, substantially existent person, what's more gross? Permanent, partless, and independent person, which is imputed by the Vedas, right? That's the grossest kind of a person that is refuted by the lower schools. The upper schools say that there is no, innate affliction, no innate ignorance that holds. Just naturally, when you look at things as an animal, as a baby, when you're growing up, innately that you're holding things as being permanent, partless, and independent. So, but that independent would be negated. That independent would be negated by the lack of svabhava, the lack of rangshin, the lack of inherent existence. If something was inheriting, if something was not inherently existent, it could not be independent.
Yes.
Okay. It could, if it was not inherently existent, it could have parts. It has to have parts. If it is not inherently existent, that means it has to exist conventionally. It has to have parts, even if it's a person.
So you would include that.
Partless and independent would also be
there
by the realization of the lack of svabhava.
Okay, fine. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Okay, anything before we finish up? Any qualms? We have office hour afterwards. Who's Rocio? You're coming office hour at one point. Who's the other office hour? Nadine, is it you? Yeah, okay. So you have a question before office hour? Or you
Yes,
just
thank you very much, George. Will we please have discussion group on Monday?
Yes, okay. You and I may be the only ones there, but hopefully there'll be other people. So we'll have discussion on Monday. Don't forget, next week we have a break. We'll continue the week after that, but you've got a lot to chew on with the PDFs and study, a lot of stuff. Okay, so let's dedicate the merits and make prayers for the long life and for the quick reincarnation. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that enlightened state. So that is the essential meaning of dedication. So we're thinking of these merits. The ultimate goal is that we would become a Guru Buddha as a result of these virtues, the collection of merit and collection of wisdom, for the purpose of leading all migrators without exception, whether we like them or not now, lead them into that everlasting state of enlightenment. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. We can think of this as a dedication, although it's a prayer. Due to these virtues, may the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, that which we already have when we don't lose it, but increase more and more. Peerless teacher and assembly of bodhisattvas, shravakas, pratyeka Buddhas, the conqueror Losang, spiritual father with his sons, together with your lineage, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer, that it be accomplished. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable venerable Guru, to you I make this request. You who were and are the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerges, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for mother sentient beings, living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. You passed away suddenly, at which I was lost hope. I was despondent. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the triple gem and the great waves of bodhicitta, of the bodhisattvas, the offspring of the conquerors, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. You who are our eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateway for fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends. Implication is, please live long and stable lives. Okay, thank you very much. Really good questions. It is really difficult material, and I had a feeling you were following. What do you think? You think this or this or? Okay. Yeah, okay. Rocio's being more realistic. Okay. You know, what do they say? Shuai shuai. What language is that? Shuai shuai. Who says that? Chinese or? I can't remember. Anyway, look forward to seeing you. So I'll see in, I think, an hour and a half, Nadine and Rocio, but we'll have discussion on Monday, and then in 2 weeks we'll try to grok, chew some more dry bones. Take care.
Thank
Be good.
you, Venerable George. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.